Hi, this is Karen from Saterin. You're listening to the SAP Security and GRC podcast, helping you on your journey to effective access risk management in SAP. In today's episode, we will be looking at SAP licensing and why it is very topical for all SAP customers. We will place an emphasis on the named users in SAP. Our host is Emile Steyn, and he'll be joined by Nikolaj Gontcharenko from EY Switzerland and Robertson from Saterin. Thank you for joining us.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's podcast. In today's session, we'll be speaking about SAP licensing and then more specifically about named users, and we'll place an emphasis on how SAP has changed the measurement of how the named users are determined, and specifically for S4HANA and RISE. So, Nikolaj, if you can maybe just tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Thank you, Emile. Hello, everyone. Saterin, thank you for having me and also allowing me to participate in this podcast. I'll introduce myself obviously quickly. I'm a director in EY Switzerland, part of the platforms team, and in the platforms team, we have a team that focuses on GRC and security in the SAP in the SAP space. So obviously it's a good topic to discuss. I hear rumors everywhere from clients that licensing will become a topic in the future and something we have to prepare ourselves and help our clients to resolve this and guide them through the requirements that SAP will bring forward here on how to measure. My experience, obviously, I've done a lot of projects already in GRC and SAP Security, worked with many clients in Switzerland and outside of Switzerland. Most of the people that are working in our team are currently engaged on S4HANA transformations. So for them, this will be very relevant to also listen in.
Thanks, Nikolaj. Thank you very much. So Ross, we'll start the first question with you. So we have seen this big change, but I think it's important for our listeners and watchers of the podcast to just understand where are we coming from and how has that changed. So if you can maybe just explain that to everyone, please.
Sure. Thanks, Emile. I think that's a great place to start, where we were or where we've come from SAP ECC, moving into SAP S4HANA, how licenses were measured, the specifications that we used to use, and looking to the future in where we're moving towards. So I think in licensing was a very gray area in the ECC area. The annual SAP license submissions would happen. A client would typically run your USMM and SLOR tools to help with the consolidation of specifications across the system. There wasn't exactly a very clear guideline from SAP as to this classifies a user as X and this classifies a user as Y, but more rather a generic description of certain functionalities within the SAP solution that would classify a user as a particular user type. So I think a lot of customers will be familiar with the professional, the limited professional, and the worker user license types. However, there's many more named user licenses within the ECC environment, some referring to line of business solutions, and some kind of depending on what kind of SAP ERP product you've got in your environment. So that being a bit of a gray area, those submissions kind of following a general sort of guideline, I think there was a lot of questions from clients over the years, at least in my experience, as to we need a clear way forward on SAP licensing. We, as a consultant, you'd say, I wish there was a kind of very structured and clear guideline as to how I need to classify my users. And I think SAP has kind of gone and done just that. And it's quite a shift from that generic sort of guideline into a very structured, crystal clear methodology for measuring your user access or user license requirements. I think the challenge that organizations are going to face in that is the actual move from this kind of generic classification structure into the new methodology. So On this new methodology, we'll just discuss a bit of background around that. So we've obviously got the named user licenses that SAP will be provisioning through the contracts with the SAP customers. They will carry the named user license types forward depending on your SAP installation. Are you moving forward with SAP RISE in the cloud, or are you having an SAP on-premise installation? So I think important to clarify on those two scenarios first. Main topic of today will be the cloud-based environment, but for those customers who are moving forward to a SAP S/4HANA on-premise installation, you will still be held to the SAP named user license classifications, those being a professional license that you can purchase, a functional license, which is effectively your limited professional license from ETC, and then your productivity license classification, which would have been your worker self-service users. So those will still be 3 named user license types that you can purchase in your agreement with SAP. A big change is then moving to SAP RISE in the cloud, where we then have what we call a full use equivalent, or an FUE block, that you will purchase from SAP in your contract or subscribe to as part of your subscription to SAP RISE. The methodology or the idea behind the FUE is to get rid of the complexities of named user licenses and how to distribute your users across different types of licenses, and rather just have one metric on your bill of materials that is then consumed by users based on the access that they have in the SAP environment. Now, how this SAP access is measured, SAP has provided us with a SAP licensing rule set. So that is an access rule set that will determine a user classification based on the authorization object and activity value that is assigned to that user within their user buffer. So basically, the objects and activities that a user has access to will determine the type of user license that user is classified as.
Yeah, I think, well, that's already a great introduction for us, just to understand that shift, which is a very big change from where we're coming from. As you said, it was quite gray. So, Nikolaj, with this very big change in how the licenses will be determined, what do you see as the main challenges then for organizations with this shift?
I think now looking on the projects that we are currently running with clients, I believe it is a major shift, but something which is still not being considered properly. How SAP is going to measure, how I look at it, right? It's going to be an additional SOD matrix, which we will still go, it's another layer of least privileged access. So we go and have an SOD matrix to be compliant and make sure that security is set up properly, that everybody has access to only to the areas that he uses. But there's, at this point, when we're designing or building authorization concept, I think there's still a lot of spillovers of transactions because we want to standardize, right? So there's a lot of transactions or activity that we allow users for the sake of standardization, because otherwise you would have to go and make every authorization or every user a single user or very individual, right? So here, I think the organizations will have to start and find a balance. It is a massive change. Of course, it's also potentially a way to save cost, to save licensing cost. But that is, of course, something which will have to be measured out. So they're introducing the Trusted Authorization Review, Sub-Trusted Authorization Review. Would that, Ross, be the matrix that we will be measuring against? Or is SAP, and do we get access to it? Just a question for us.
Thanks, Nikolaj. I think that is a great point. I have had some experience with the SAP Star service. So I think quite important to clarify on the new licensing metrics and the SAP Star service. So the Star service, or the SAP Trusted Authorization Review, is a pre-service offered by SAP to clients to almost use this rule set and the tool that is provided. That's standard. So even without the Star service, the client is able to access these tools and run the measurements themselves. However, the intention behind the SAP star service is for SAP themselves to take a look at your results and make some suggestions based on where they can see some potential cleanup in the environment. Now, how in-depth that service goes, I cannot speak to, as I'm obviously not part of that service. However, what I find in performing similar activities at clients is this new rule set considers classifications based on access. Who's got access to what activities? The cleanup potential for a client is potentially then shifting the focus from what is assigned to users to what is used by users. Yeah. So only once you really have a full understanding of what every user is using in the organization and what transaction or what objects and activity values transactions are using that are assigned to these users, then will you be able to achieve an almost ideal end state scenario of we are only consuming the licenses that we require as part of our business processes. That I think is a gray area in this transition period as to how organizations are going to achieve this, because ultimately when you're going into the authorizations at that level of detail within a role design, it's a very technical process, very resource and time consuming process. And a service offered by SAP may be targeted at improving the current situation, but it might not be aimed at achieving the best case scenario at the end of it. So that's where your implementation partners, your trusted GRC partner is going to probably provide you with that additional benefit of cutting it down from what it maybe can be to what it should be. Okay.
What I take from that is, that a lot of companies don't have that visibility, of what should that potential best case scenario be. So they don't know what they're aiming for. So that I think is one of the challenges is to what do they need to do to gain that visibility so that they know how basically to design the roles that it addresses not only segregation of duties, achieve the potential standardization, and also achieve an ideal state for licensing. So maybe just then to touch on something that Nikolaj mentioned there was standardization. So what we've been discussing is the potential where companies see the impact of standardization on the license cost, where they might actually change their opinion on whether standardization is the way to go purely because of the impact on licensing. So there's potentially lots of unknowns, but we will, I think, keep our ears to the ground and see how companies continue to deal with this type of scenario. So maybe just moving on then from that portion, Ross, you might earlier mention of the FUEs. So you can maybe just spend a couple of minutes explaining what is an FUE exactly and what is the ratio then of that to the license types that's available for companies.
Sure. So I think earlier I referred to the on-premise and cloud or RISE-based implementations of SAP S/4HANA. So the FUE will only be applicable to the cloud-based installation. And I think for purposes of licensing discussion, where the customization and how your setup of authorization plays such an important role, I'm going to be referring to the private cloud edition of SAP RISE, right? Because we know that on the public version, the public instance of cloud, on the public instance of SAP S/4HANA in the public cloud, there's very limited customization possibility there. So maybe not as many chances to misplace an authorization value or object and end up with these over classifications by role design. So within the private cloud, you'll have your FUEs or full use equivalents. Those blocks will be part of your bill of materials and your agreement with SAP. Those FUE blocks are then consumed by 3 named user types. So these named user types will not appear on your bill of materials, but they will be the metric that they are classifying your SAP users against. So we effectively have 3 levels, similar to how it has been in ECC before, and will be with your on-premise S/4HANA installations. But starting with level 1 will be your self-service users. This is all display activities, your HR, your time management, kind of all your employee self-service related activities, your requisitioning, things like that. That will be included within the use rights of a self-service user. We then move to level 2, if you'd like to look at it like that, which is your core users, or users that will be using majority of the SAP core functionality. So that is master data maintenance, working in your more kind of reporting and planning activities. And then we move to level 3, which will be then your advanced type users. Those are then users that are working with more professional type activities or functions within SAP. Those that have financial impacts, money coming in and leaving the organization. That will be, conducting price changes, performing system configurations, things like that, releasing of block invoices. Those will be considered your advanced type activities. So actually a small subset of what is available or used within your SAP environment, contributing the advanced type classifications to users. Unfortunate though that the measurement is based on access and not what users are using. So at least in our experience in the first few clients that we've embarked on engagements around license optimizations with, we see a trend that almost every single user it's almost backwards. Every single user pretty much in the system is measured as an advanced or level 3 user. Then you'll have a bit less or very few users classified as your core, and even less users classified as self-service, when in fact, in the ideal state, it actually should be the other way around. So I think that, and from a cost perspective, I think it's also quite important to note that there's a shift from under the intention of a GRC solution, almost being like the preventative measure for fraudulent activities, audit findings, etc., that could potentially result in a cost implication to the company. Whereas this licensing element of your GRC activities within SAP is now basically that cost is almost material straight from the get-go, whether it's SAP increasing your current bill of materials to kind of acquire new licenses, or whether at your contract renewal there is a additional license material on that bill of materials, and that comes at a percentage increase as well because your bill of materials is now changing. So I think the emphasis is very much on cost. That cost, as we've seen with our clients, can be quite immense. So understanding maybe how those user types are consuming the FUE can put it into a better picture for our listeners. So we spoke about level 3 users, so those being our self-service users. In terms of a full use equivalent block, they will be consuming a 30-to-1 ratio of that full use equivalent block. So essentially you can have 30 users on your system at a self-service level. That will be 1 full use equivalent on your bill of materials. At your core user level, you then have a 5-to-1 ratio, or 5 core users in your environment consuming 1 FUE from your bill of materials, and then your advanced users at a 1-to-1 ratio of consuming 1 full use equivalent for every single advanced user. So I think very quickly, to put out a bit of a projection there, if we've got 30 users that should be performing the activities of a self-service user, however they have the authorizations of an advanced user, you very quickly have your bill of material increasing from potentially 1 full use equivalent to 30 full use equivalents that SAP will charge you for, which is, I think, very quickly can get out of hand or inflate those potential true-up costs on your licenses.
So the next question I'll pose to Nikolaj. Nikolaj, so with the challenges and then the license measurement moving to access-based, what would you suggest to organizations? How will they go about to addressing these issues?
I think for organization now, it's very important to get the visibility of what users they have in the system. We obviously work in the security space, and we know that all users want as much as authorization as they can get. Right? It's like collect them all, unfortunately. And the good thing of that is, of course, is that we now have another reason, in addition to the, for example, SOD, segregation of duty matrix, or a rule set, we have now an additional area to actually talk to the users and explain to them that least privilege is the way to go. So, but getting the rules from SAP would obviously, and Ross, what you explained, getting that materialized and getting that structured would obviously be a very good way for us to approach clients, to make them aware that there is a potential in cost saving, in addition to complying with your SOD matrix. We'll probably run action usages, show them the results, right? And we probably also have to consider building tools around it. Let's see what SAP provides and what we would need to build on top as a consulting, right, to help our clients here. So there probably will be a big chunk of role design here, which we'll need to do. But role designs is just the middle layer, right? Because in the end, what you're measuring is not the amount of roles, it's the amount of data you can access. So in the end, it will also impact. What I'm a bit, maybe on different topic, what I'm a bit worried about is the standardization, right? We always said we try to have an accountant, and we have 20 accountants who have this and this authorization. Now we might have to break them up, and we have to find the right balance with our clients to actually still go with promote standardization, because obviously standardization is minimizing maintenance costs in the future, right? Having an authorization expert working with every single user to define his authorizations is a big effort. You'll need big authorization team. This is where standardization helps. Here, maybe it's even not a good thing to, or maybe blunt to say, but this is actually going against standardization, right? That's my feeling, and we need to find a balance and help our clients with this and support them, guide them, and use our knowledge and experience, of course, in this area.
Yeah, that's a couple of great points there. Thanks, Nikolaj. I think, just speaking more about the standardization is, I think companies would find that certain areas of the business would still be suited to standardization, but it might not be something that can be applied company-wide. So maybe whether it's people in warehouse, maybe it could be applied there, but not as well to people within finance, for instance. So Ross, let's just pose another question to you. Maybe it's the last one of today. Just what tips would you be able to give organizations? Where to start with this?
I think first and foremost is visibility, understanding your current situation, so that when your next contract renewal with SAP comes up, or you are part of a RISE migration, that the licensing true-up costs do not come as a surprise. And I think for many organizations, as soon as they get that visibility and see what they're in for, it will then spark the reaction to get that under control as soon as possible. And to understand that, a very technical and very complex process to almost take an entire role design and now add this additional layer of licensing to it. At least what we've seen is that it pretty much is going to result in a complete role redesign to achieve that ideal best case scenario, which we all know is a very resource intensive exercise. So in saying that, don't leave it to the last minute. This is not something that is a quick fix. And considering the timelines of ECC support, moving over to S4HANA, there is not a whole lot of time to get this done, but please just prioritize giving it the time and attention that it deserves. So look into your SAP trusted partner to assist you in this process. Look at the tools that are available to help facilitate the cleanup activities or potentially the role redesign exercise. Then those are the solutions that are going to help you achieve this cost saving, and also the expertise and experience of your partners to help achieve what Nikolaj was referring to earlier in terms of that balance between the cost of maintenance versus the cost of licensing. Some organizations moving through this, those that are already on S4HANA, you may already have a prescribed FUE count or license count, and through an exercise like a cleanup or a role redesign, you may find your consumption coming in below your entitlement. Some organizations may look at that as a cost saving in your next contract renewal. Some organizations might see that as an opportunity to use the license entitlement that you're not consuming to expand on your SAP solution capabilities. additional users onto the environment, obviously coming then at no additional licensing cost because you've got that to work with. So a question of cost saving versus opportunity for the organization itself. There's quite a big player there. And then finally, for SAP organizations that are already on SAP RISE with your private cloud, just get in touch with your SAP portfolio manager to understand when your SAP license metering will start. What are the timelines that they are willing to give you to either sort out or correct your current role design to ensure that you are not held to a true-up cost that can potentially be avoided.
Nikolaj, any last thoughts from you on this?
I'm excited about this change. I need to learn more, and I'm also looking forward to work with Cetarion to accelerate any of the client's requirements. Obviously, you have the tools for it to help support. We don't have tools, right? That's where we work with vendors for. We support with our knowledge, experience, and the project management around setting this up. Obviously, there's a very big change management aspect to this. So yeah, we'll stay close to our clients and obviously so involve Cetarion to accelerate any of the projects that we will be doing in this area.
Thank you very much to both our guests. If you are interested in to learn more about this topic, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to assist. Thank you, and until the next one.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Emile.
Thanks, Nikolaj.